Good evening. Welcome. It looks like folks have made it in all right. So I think we'll go ahead and begin with tonight's program. First of all, I would like to officially welcome you to McKenzie River Trust Town Hall meeting, otherwise known as our third HabiChat, a virtual ethnobotany tour of Wren Marsh with Ashley Russell. My name is Holly McCrae, and I'm the Events and Outreach Manager for McKenzie River Trust. It's a pleasure to join you this evening. And before we begin, I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping pointers about the Zoom platform. When you entered the webinar, the system automatically put you on mute and turned off your webcam. So you're in a view-only, listen-only mode. After Ashley's presentation, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So to submit a question, you're just going to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. You can submit those questions at any point during the presentation tonight, and we will be answering those, and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as possible. And if you have to leave the presentation for any reason, if you're having technical difficulties or you need to head off for life reasons, we'll be sending an email out tomorrow that'll include a link to the recording of tonight's presentation. I want to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous people who stewarded the lands we are on today and for many generations before us. Colonization by white settlers drove most Indigenous people away from their homelands, usually by force or coercion. It's important to acknowledge our past so that we may work towards a more just and equitable future. McKenzie River Trust projects and service area include the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya, Siletz, Coos, Lower Umpqua, Siuslaw, Lala, and other bands and tribes. Today, many of their descendants are part of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. Please take a moment now to reflect on where you are standing today or where you call home, and honor those who cared for the land before you. Thank you. We understand that having a role in land ownership means we have a responsibility to those whose lands were stolen from them. The land calls us to commit to continue learning how to be better stewards of the land, as well as better allies to all the peoples that inhabit it. I know many of you who are attending tonight are friends and members of McKenzie River Trust. Please know we appreciate your support and really miss seeing you in person. For those of you who are new to McKenzie River Trust, welcome. We are a land trust, nonprofit land trust that works to protect the lands and rivers we love in Western Lane County. We have about 6,700 acres of land under our management from the Cascades to the coast. And throughout the year, we're engaged in restoration and stewardship activities. We provide volunteer opportunities for those wanting to get their hands dirty, helping us achieve our work. And in non-COVID times, we offer tours and educational opportunities on the land. If you would like to help us in this work, a gift of any size makes you a member, and I will post a link in the chat box later on where you can make a donation tonight if you'd like to join us as a member. Our original plan for this ethnobotany program was to do a walking tour out at Waite Ranch, which is located on the Siuslaw River. Sadly, with COVID, we canceled that tour, but I'm so very grateful that Ashley Russell agreed to take her GoPro into the field, providing us with this virtual tour of Wren Marsh. Before I turn it over to Ashley, I have invited Daniel Dietz, McKenzie River Trust Conservation Manager, to join us to give a little background to the property that Ashley will be talking about tonight, and talk a little bit about our role on the coast and what we're working on out there. So at this point, Daniel, do you want to go ahead and join us?
Thanks, Holly. And I think I've shared my screen now. So once again, I'm Daniel Dietz. I'm the Conservation Director here at the McKenzie River Trust. And I just want to give a quick introduction to Wren Marsh and its close companion, Waite Ranch. As Holly mentioned, MRT's mission is to help people protect and care for the lands and rivers they cherish in Western Oregon. And despite our name, the McKenzie River Trust, we actually work in areas outside of the McKenzie River watershed. This is a map here of the Siuslaw Estuary. And we first dipped our toe into the waters of the Siuslaw Estuary in 2009 when we purchased North Fork Marsh. Today, we'll be looking at one of our most recent purchases, which is Wren Marsh, that we purchased in September of 2019. We are one of the many partners who have conserved lands in the Siuslaw Estuary, which is a conservation focus on the Central Oregon coast. In all, about 1,000 acres of land have been protected in the main stem Siuslaw Estuary. Everything from Cox Island, owned by the Nature Conservancy, to the bright green properties, which are conserved by the McKenzie River Trust, to some areas which are still privately owned but are protected by conservation easements held by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Wren Marsh sits across the river from White Ranch, which the trust purchased in 2010, and both properties are currently freshwater wetlands, but they were historically brackish tidal wetlands, and only a series of dikes prevents the daily flow of water in and out of the property. The Trust's primary goal is to restore tidal hydrology by breaching these levees and reconnecting the floodplain to the Siuslaw River. We're very fortunate to have many collaborators in this efforts, but we are especially grateful to our two primary partners in this venture, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, and the Siuslaw Watershed Council. Restoration is vitally important because the Siuslaw Estuary has lost about 67% of its tidal wetlands as a result of development, transportation infrastructure, and other land use actions. Functioning tidal wetland systems are unique, and they're critical components of a healthy Siuslaw River watershed. They sequester and stabilize sediment and contaminants. They provide abundant nutrients that form the basis of a complex food chain. They produce and store a vast amount of native vegetation, and they provide critical habitat for a host of aquatic and terrestrial species while sequestering vast amounts of carbon. While tidal wetland restoration delivers benefits to all species that rely on those ecosystem services, its potential to benefit coho salmon and Chinook salmon populations is currently a local, state, and federal restoration priority. Coho salmon is a focus of the Siuslaw Coho Partnership, a collection of nonprofits, tribal governments, and state and federal government entities working to make and create a coho salmon stronghold. Estuary systems are especially important to salmonid species, and it is these rich systems where they feed and begin to transform from freshwater juveniles to saltwater living adults. But I don't think we're here tonight to hear me talk about fish, although I thank you for allowing me to provide some conservation context to the area. You know, one of my fondest memories of White Ranch occurred about 2 years ago when I was meeting several members of the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians and the Siuslaw Watershed Council. It was one of my first meetings with the tribes. They had just become more involved with the project, and I learned rather belatedly that my son was not going to have school that day. And I was very fortunate that the tribes, rather than wanting to cancel the field trip, asked me to bring my son along. And that was, I think, one of the first times I met Ashley. And I remember her very patiently teaching us about the culturally significant plants that were found there. And my son still talks about running through clouds of cattail seeds with a huge grin on his face. In an ideal world, you would be there right now and you would not have a better teacher than Ashley, but I hope you are going to be able to enjoy the next best thing. And if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen, I'll turn it back over to you, Holly.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's see, do you need help not sharing?
Wait a minute, I got it now. There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Ashley Russell. Ashley is an Oregon State University graduate of environmental sciences with an emphasis on fisheries and wildlife science. She's currently enrolled through the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine and pursuing her herbal certification. Ashley is recognized for her knowledge of culturally significant species, including tribal first foods and weaving materials, as well as her art and singing. Ashley serves as the water protection specialist for the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. So Ashley, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from here. And for all of you out there viewing, please remember that if you have questions, to enter those into the Q&A box as they pop into your mind during the presentation. Ashley, it's all there for you.
All right, thanks, Holly. And thanks, Daniel, for the introduction to Weight Ranch and Wren Marsh. And again, apologies, like Holly said, and Daniel, we would have loved to have given a tour in person, but hopefully this is the next best thing. So I just want to put a caveat on, we went to Wren Marsh with my GoPro. I don't know how many of you have used the GoPro, but the microphone can get a little scratchy, so I apologize in advance. So let me see if I can share my screen. Okay. Pull up the video. All right, there we go. And Holly or Daniel, let me know if it's not playing correctly or if we have any problems, please. All right, here we go. Enjoy. Oh, and I stole Daniel's map.
So, welcome to Wren Marsh, folks. This is 8 acres that MRT owns, McKenzie River Trust owns now, and just downstream is the Wilbur mitigation bank. So you guys will see once we get up there, there's a levee down there separating the two properties, and then there's a property line right here by that that frame you can see. That is the upstream edge of their pasture. So this used to belong to Dick Bithian. I don't know if any of you have heard that name, but he sold it to MRT last year in 2019. So let's go check it out.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we just got over the little bridge there. Not the bridge. Dock. All right, so we're gonna go look for some native plants here. Kyle was saying that this used to be pasture for cattle grazing, and so we may not find a whole lot of native plants, but we'll see. So we found our first plant. This is a species of Juncus. I'm not sure if it's the native Juncus or not, but Juncus was used in basketry. Sometimes it was used in basket caps. And it's very flexible. So you'd harvest this and dry it, and then you'd re-water it. It's very sturdy. And it's very easy to work with. It was also used in other types of baskets and handbags. And that's Juncus. So here we have some fruiting bulrush. I'm not sure if this was large or small. This is pretty big. This was used for thatching, so like a quick temporary structure, like if you're going upriver to your fish camp and you needed to repair sides of your temporary home for the next few months, you would use this for the sides and for some of the roof. This one's not as, so sedges have edges. There's the three edges in a triangle shape, and these aren't they're not rough and they don't cut your hands like some of the other sedges, like the slough sedge. There's a pretty good patch here. So if you needed some quick thatching, this would be the place to harvest it from. Oh, it looks like there might be some rose back there too. Let's go check that out. So here's some native rose.
And there's quite a bit of variation.
Might be the Rosa Nootkana or Nootka rose. But this was used medicinally.
And the rose hips are a good source of vitamin C, so these were eaten. And then the roses were used in water as a soothing wash. And they smell great anyway, but medicinal and edible. And we also have some crab apples here. Right here. These don't look very healthy. But crab apple was mixed with salmon eggs.
Yeah, it's interesting about that. I'm thinking that might be possible during their winter.
Yeah.
It's just
I think they were made into like a pemmican too, weren't they?
Yeah,
Into like cakes and stuff. And then we have some cut leaf blackberry here. It's not the native one. It's the one that ripens the latest in the season. So you have your native blackberry, which is actually right here. And then you have the Himalayan blackberry, which I'm sure it's here somewhere. So here we got some invasive foxglove, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. Very toxic. Oh yeah, there's some of the flowers right there. Some people confuse it with mullein, which is a medicinal plant, because the leaves look very similar. But mullein is edible. Foxglove is deadly. And I did see some curly dock over here, which it's not in its prime anymore. Rumex crispus, or this might be angustifolius, but this is a hepatic. It's good for your liver. You can eat the leaves. You can even eat the seeds, kind of like an ancient grain. And the new leaves produce this, I wish it was, the new leaves were newer right now. They produce a film kind of like aloe vera, and you can use it if you run into some stinging nettle. So you just apply it to the place where you got stung by a stinging nettle, and the sting will go away. Oh, we do have some. Here's the Rumex in leaf. Let's see, we do have some new. Oh, I might be able to show you guys. You guys see that substance right there? It's like this milky. That's what you put on. Oh, here, yeah, right here. Oh, yeah. Okay, looks like we got some new salmonberry shoots here. Newer plants. So when these appear in the spring, the new shoots will be really red, and you can harvest them, peel the outer skin off, and you can eat it. This is actually still pretty fresh, actually. This is probably woody, but it is definitely, probably should be losing its leaves soon. But it's very delicious. It's called bear candy. My favorite one, though, is the thimbleberry, which I believe I saw some over here. This is thimbleberry, also known as nature's toilet paper. Looks like we have some violets. So this probably produces the yellow flowered violet, Viola species, and the leaves are actually edible, and so are the flowers. You can candy the flowers. I've made them into a hummus. The newer leaves are really tender, so if they're like a darker. There's the mother huckleberry plant. Oh, there's even some huckleberries on them. What do we have here? Looks like we got some, so we got the evergreen huckleberry, which does not lose its leaves, and then we look like we got some red huckleberry up there, which produces the red huckleberries, which I think are better. And then these bigger trees, we got some hemlock. The hemlock, the way you tell the hemlock is they have the teeny tiny cones and the teeny tiny needles. And there's the hemlock right there. The bark was used in dye, and sometimes the roots were used to like tie your bundles of salmon or meat, or not as strong as the spruce root. And here's a spruce tree over here. What you tell spruce from Douglas fir, actually. Oh, this is spruce. It's not as pokey. This must be newer ones. Spruce is usually pokey. Yeah, there we go. Pokey when you touch the needles, and Douglas fir is not. But the other way you tell is the spruce bark. It's kind of like peels off like potato chips. So that's how you tell. Oh, and then we have some cedar over here. And cedar was like one of the most honored plants. Not that all of them are honored, but it was like considered the giver of life. We made our houses out of them. We made clothing out of them. We made our canoes out of them because rivers are our highways, and even still today. And you can also eat the bark, but we have better food, so only in lean times. And the leaves are medicinal. They keep away insects. You can burn them as smudge. It's just an amazing, amazing plant, amazing tree. Well, we have some chitim back there. I don't know if I can get close enough to show you guys. Gosh, there's just so many plants here. Chitim or cascara, the bark was used commercially as a sedative, or not a sedative, a laxative rather. And it produces berries that you can eat, actually. I just had some the other day, and they were actually good. A lot of people think that it gives the same laxative effect as the bark, but it does not. So the berries get a bad rap. And the bark was used to produce a yellow dye for basketry. And then we have over here some ocean spray. So here's what the leaves look like. And when these are flowering, they produce like this spray. It's also called cream bush. It's very distinctive when it's flowering. This plant was used, or this tree, the stems were used for arrows and tools like lamprey gaffs and such as that, because it's very strong. It's also called ironwood. One of the strongest woods around. Oh, we got some self-heal also here. Not native, but this is also medicinal. It's good for a poultice, like if you get a scratch or a bruise or a wound, and you can also eat it. Gosh, we're just so rich here. McKenzie River Trust is very lucky to have acquired this property. There's still a lot of natives here, even though it used to be a homestead where they grazed cattle. Still lots of potential. What I wanted to show you guys is this elderberry. So this is what the leaf arrangement looks like. And elderberry is an amazing plant. It gets a bad rap because it has cyanogenic glycosides in the seeds. So you don't want to eat the seeds, but the fruit, you can produce a syrup, and it actually fights off the flu virus if taken regularly. So it's a adaptogen. And you can take it daily. So we have here, this is likely red, but there's also blue. That's the Sambucus species. When you dry the berries, it inhibits the cyanogenic glycosides, but then you can also cook them and it inhibits it. And then the flowers are safe. You can eat the flowers, you can dry the flowers, and they also produce similar medicinal qualities as the berries, but they don't have as much. And what else about elderberry? There's one more thing I wanted to tell you guys. One thing I forgot to mention about elderberry is that the wood was used as an instrument called a clacker stick. And so as you guys can see, these are super straight. So you would cut the elderberry, and it's got this inner pith, and you would hollow out the pith. So you'd split it in half, you'd hollow out the pith, and then it would make a clacking sound, and so we used it as an instrument. Well, here we have some skunk cabbage. And I have Jesse Beers here, our cultural stewardship manager for the tribe.
So with skunk cabbage, it's kind of an interesting plant. It's here it's really eaten up by the slugs and stuff, but it's a big kind of dinosaur era looking plant, big old leaves. And the leaves can be used to wrap up food like salmon and things like that in an earth oven. So you cook it in the earth oven, and that way you don't smell the skunk smell, and then when it breaks down it doesn't have that smell, and it kind of flavors the salmon like kind of reminds me of green peppers or something like that. So some people like it, some people don't. I personally like it. It's good. And then below the ground there's a piece that is about, can be like 8, 9, 10 inches long, and then you get it's a kind of tubular, and then you get the base, which is just a root that's kind of like a hand going out flat. And so you dig that part and you cook that in the ashes for many hours. They say 4 to 7 hours in the ashes. People have done it in stews though, and different things to try to break down the toxins. And once it's all cooked up, it's basically like cabbage, so skunk cabbage. And why you need to cook it for so long is because it's got these toxins in them that if you just ate it fresh, it basically tastes like you're chewing on broken glass or fiberglass. It will inflame your mouth really bad and can inflame your throat. And so you never want to eat it fresh, and you only want to, if you cook it, you want to have it done by somebody that knows what they're doing, especially with the under the ground part. The wrapping the leaves of salmon, if you have somebody that knows how to do an earth oven properly, that's a little easier to do.
You can also use the leaves in the oven, can't you?
You could, but I would be afraid of it smelling up your area, like your house and stuff.
So if you don't mind the skunk smell, then
that's part of the nice thing about the earth oven is it's all contained, and the smell doesn't really escape. Whereas an oven, if you're doing it in your house or a barbecue or something, then you all have to deal with that skunk smell while it cooks.
Thanks, Jesse. So here we have some chickweed. And this is an edible. It's very yummy. And you can also, some people add it to salves. It's good for, it has what's called mucilage. You also find mucilage in oatmeal, and it helps with cholesterol. And it's very soothing to the skin. So very dual purpose plant. We also have some plantain here, not to be confused with the banana. What else do we have here? Got some more self-heal that is actually in flower. This is actually primo harvesting right here. This produces the really yummy fiddleheads, which it is way past its prime right now. We will not find any, but in the springtime, in March, you can eat the new growth that spirals, and that's really yummy. So here you have some hedge nettle, not to be confused with stinging nettle. They can be, you can sometimes confuse the two. The way you tell the difference, you don't even have to touch them. You can see like it doesn't have really sharp hairs, it only has teeny tiny hairs. And then also if you catch it in flower, they have purple flowers, which I don't, oh, I do see one right here. So they have the purple tulip flowers. And stinging nettle does not. They have like this, these dangling flowers, and they're not even in the same family. This is in the Lamiaceae family, and nettles, I can't remember, but they're Urtica, so they're not related. They were grouped in the same family before, but now they've since been separated. But and hedge nettle is also medicinal. So they're both very useful. So this here is maidenhair fern. It is used in basketries and overlay, and you can also make a hair tonic out of it. So you take the leaves and you put it in some hot water, so you kind of make like a tea, and then you rinse your hair with it, and it can last up to 3 days in the fridge. But for the overlay, you take the stem and you want to harvest it in July or August. It is the first week of September, but we are in a damp area, so we're going to try to see if it will split. So you use the, oh, this one's really dry, but this will have a, this is not a good example. Oh no, yep, there we go. We have a red side and a black side, and you use the black side as the overlay in basketry. So you take this and you'll split it. Yeah, so here's the maiden hair fern stem, and so you're going to split. So you can either dry these whole and then process them later, which some weavers do, or you can process them on site. I've heard both things. So you want to try to get the black on one side and the red on the other. Looks like this. You usually take like a stick and like go down the length of it to break it up. Let's see which side will let me do it. This one lost its leaves, so it might be very brittle. So you'll split it in half. This one's very brittle. But so the red side's brittle and the black side will remain intact. And then that's what you'll overlay it on a root as you're twining, or any other element that you're twining with. And it'll have this very shiny, black, beautiful color. Again, maidenhair fern. Here we have some Siberian miner's lettuce.
Oh, really?
You can use this in salad. It tastes kind of like spinach. It's not native. We have 2 species here, and we have cleavers here. And you take this and you roll it in a ball and eat it that way, like in a pill form. If it's young enough, so like these, you could probably eat it without the hair sticking to your throat. So let's see if I'm lucky.
It looks like this little valley was super altered in some way, you know?
Yeah, something.
No, I was lucky. So if you get it young enough, it won't stick to the back of your throat. But it also has lots of mucilage, and it's good for cholesterol. And it's also, people also add it to their salves. It's got a lot of good skin healing properties. Here we have some monkey flower, and it is edible. It does not taste very good though. This is what it looks like when it's not in flower. We have some beaked hazel here. So this produces a nut, like 2 nuts, hence the beaked name. Well, it produces these weird little tusks on the end, but then it's also used in basketry. So we made our burden baskets, our baby baskets called cradle boards. We also made fish traps out of the older straight shoots. Very useful plant. You can eat the nuts and you can weave amazing baskets and traps with them. So here I have vine maple, and this is the other part that I need for my fish trap basket. So this wood is very flexible. You can split it and then you can either steam bend it very easily, or I found that you can just bend it very carefully without steam bending it. And it makes hoops for the fish trap, and then it also makes hoops for a game. And then you can also use it to make different lean-tos to dry your meats and that sort of thing. But yeah, very versatile, flexible wood. On here we have an alder. I can get it good. Alder, the bark was used for red dye, for basketry, and regalia. You can dye cedar bark and maple bark. And it was also used as firewood to smoke our salmon. And here's a large elderberry, but the fruits are done now. We have some sword fern. You could eat the roots of this. We also used it kind of to mop up like salmon blood, and kind of like a mat, multi-purpose mat. Bigger cedar. Oh, we even have some cow parsnips still growing. So here's the cow parsnip. The new shoots of this can also be eaten. It's known as Indian celery. But a word of caution, it does have photosensitizing chemicals in it. So if when it's older and you get the juices on you and then you're out in the sun a while, it will cause blisters. So most people just avoid it, but. I have John Schaefer here. Here's our tribal biologist. He's also what you would call a phycologist?
Mycologist.
Mycologist. My bad. What's a phycologist?
Algae, kelp.
Well, you know those too. Anyway, he's just a knower of all things, and he's found some delicious fungi.
Yeah, this is a Pleurotus species. There's several. They're hard to identify, but they're all edible. And in this area, they typically favor hardwoods, although occasionally you find them on a conifer. This looks like an alder. And these are really pale because they were in the shade, but they can range from dark chocolate brown to a paler color. You can see they're offset guild mushroom. These are actually in really good shape compared to some on the other side of the log, which are pretty much completely decayed. But look at that.
That looks good.
This is the same species or at least the same genus that you can find in the stores locally. Like McKay's sells fresh oyster mushrooms. They're highly cultivatable, and the ones you buy are cultivated, not wild harvested. A lot of mushrooms are wild harvested because they can't be cultivated easily, but that is not the case with this one. There's a slug.
Can you feed that to that slug? Here we have some big leaf maple. It's just starting to get ready to shed its leaves. It is almost fall. But the big leaf maple was used, the bark was used for regalia. So you'd harvest the bark and you'd dye it and make it into a skirt. Maple wood itself was used in paddle making. And what else about maple? You can make a syrup out of it, although it does take a lot. It's not like the sugar maples. Here's a big spruce tree, and it looks like we have some sap.
So yeah, this is spruce sap, traditionally used as like a chewing gum. You can actually still find it for sale if you look online and look up spruce gum, and it's just basically cleaned spruce sap. So you could harvest this harder material and heat it up in the oven with a screen to filter out all the needles and moss and bugs. And you'll get a clear yellow sap that you can chew, and the chewing is just like chewing gum. It's shockingly like chewing gum. When you first bite into it, though, it explodes in your mouth and shatters into unpleasant powder. But you have to keep working it.
Ooh, you're really selling it.
But yeah, most people, you gotta tell them that, because hey, want to try some spruce gum? They take one bite, they go, pah, and you waste all your work. You gotta keep chewing on that for at least 20 seconds, and then it'll start coming together, and then it's like gum. Another problem is if you get it when it's not dried out enough, where it's still somewhat liquid, it'll stick to your teeth tremendously. You can't hardly get it off of your teeth. So it has to be at the right stage. But I think when you clean it and you're cooking it, you're driving off a lot of the volatiles. So that fixes that problem if there's a little bit that's not quite dry. But if you get the right stuff, and I don't know if I can get this, this is probably going to be a mistake.
Super hard.
I did find some that had been on the tree too long, and it never did come together.
Oh.
And that was a new one on me. This looks okay. I think I'm going to try it, but I'll probably be picking out my teeth all day. You're supposed to. I don't have the time or the equipment to process it. And this is pretty clean. It's doing the powder thing.
Does anybody else want to try?
Give a couple steps there, John.
This might be too old. It's not coming together.
Ah, so you gotta work it. Sounds like too much work.
Well, you're getting it right off the tree. It's very bitter and resinous too. It's not great.
Yep. There's a pinch of hickory. Oh, that's clever out there.
Ah! Gross.
Yeah, it's just not coming together. It kind of is, but not enough. See, it looks, wow, that was really dark. It's not supposed to look like that either.
No.
Might have a lot of bark in it.
The right tree.
Thanks, John.
All right, so that is our virtual Wren Marsh tour for this evening. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and the microphone wasn't too distracting.
Thank you. Actually, that was great. We did have some questions come in for you. Let me bring those up here. So the first question is, when was this? When were you out there recording?
So I believe it was September 4th, so just last month.
Okay. And then there was a question about the cedar. So I think you just said cedar, and there was a question about whether it was red cedar or incense cedar, and are both significant, or can you speak to which cedar?
So that one was the western red cedar. So here on the coast, we only had the Port Orford, the white cedar, and the western red cedar. And then incense cedar is further inland. So we use both the Port Orford cedar and the red cedar in regalia. We use the red cedar more for canoe building and plank splitting, so to build our plank houses. What else? So I said regalia, planks, canoes. And it depended on the carver. Some preferred the white cedar over the red cedar and vice versa. And then the incense cedar, when the men would go hunting, they would harvest the roots of the incense cedar and would bring them back, and we would use them in our basketry.
Great, thank you. You talked about the violet hummus. Are you willing to share that recipe?
I can, yeah.
That would be fantastic. If you want to send that to me, I'm happy to include that in the email I'll send out to folks. after.
Okay, it might take me a day to say, I have it up here. I don't have it written down because it's kind of like a amalgamation of a bunch of different, it just depends on what I have on hand. Like sometimes I won't have enough violets and I'll substitute chickweed in for some of it. So yeah, but yeah, I'm willing to share that.
A question about the Siberian candy flower. Is that non-native or native?
So it's non-native. We do have a native Claytonia species here. I wish I could remember the exact species right now. But it's kind of more like a square shape around the stem, like the leaf goes around the whole stem. So it's distinctive. You can tell the difference.
Okay.
But they're used you can use both of them for the same purposes.
Okay.
Maybe I can look that up right now while we're talking.
Okay. Multitask. So a question about the Three Rivers Casino in Florence. Are there cultural and educational displays about the tribes there?
You know, I have not been up there in a while, and they switch out stuff all the time. So I know there used to be, but I'm not sure today. I know they've done some remodeling. And
Okay.
if there isn't, then we definitely should get some in there.
Yes, indeed. Or do you actually have a place where you suggest people go who want to learn more?
Our tribal website, so it's CTCLUSI.org, so CTCLUSI.org.
Okay, great.
We will also be having, I'm not sure that a lot of people are familiar with the Senate Bill 13 curriculum that Governor Kate Brown put into law, was it last year? So anyway, it allowed the tribes to develop their own curriculum to put in the schools so that kids could learn about the tribe where they live. So we developed a story map, so that'll be available soon. And that was in partnership with EcoTrust. So I'm very excited for that to come out. So that'll be another way to learn about the tribe.
And people will be able to access that from your website?
I think so.
Yeah. Oh,
and then another great resource, which I think you were going to mention, is Patty We're at Phillips' Ethnobotany book. Yeah, you have it. So Patty is my distant cousin. She's also Miluk Coos, and she's our linguist specialist. And she wrote that book, and that is where I learned a lot of my ethnobotany. Well, from her was my ethnobotany knowledge.
I will include a link to that book for the email I send out tomorrow as well, just so folks can look that up. It is a great book.
And she's an amazing lady. And I found the Claytonia. It's Claytonia lanceolata is the one that's native here.
Great, thank you. Would you be willing to say a little bit more about sword fern root?
Yeah, so sword fern root we did eat, but since modern times we've discovered, or at least scientists have discovered, that it's got some chemicals that aren't so great for our kidneys. So we don't eat as much of it now.
Here's a great question for you. Can you talk a little bit about the ethics of harvesting and how you go about doing it in a sustainable, respectful way?
Okay, so when we go out and gather, which I did before this presentation or before this video, we smudge and we say a prayer, and then we ask the plant before we ever harvest it in our own way, you know, hey, is it okay if we harvest you for this purpose? And sometimes the plant will just say no, they'll just have a bad feeling. So you just move on. You just either don't harvest from there at all, or you just move on to a different plant and do the same thing. And so our rule of thumb is before you even harvest anything, so you ask the plant for permission, and then you make sure you look at the plant population, and if it seems like there's enough to harvest, then we only harvest a quarter of that plant. And also the harvesting depends on if it's perennial or if it's only an annual. So if it's perennial, some species you can do what's called trim and come again. So like tule that we use in our basketry, you could trim the tule and then it'll resprout. Same with the cattail. But other things that you harvest the roots of, so like camas, it would depend on the time of year. So ideally you would harvest camas right before it flowers or right after it's done flowering, because while it's flowering, it's putting all its energy into its flowers and producing seeds. But because there's also death camas, which some people get confused, because as a bulb, it's very hard to tell the difference between death camas and camas. So we generally do that right after it has flowered, and it's the seed capsules are starting to, because you can tell if the seed capsules are still there, you can tell the difference between death camas and regular camas if it's still in seed. So you'd harvest it while the seed pods are ripe, and then so all that disturbance while you're harvesting, that's going to dump all those seeds into that newly disturbed soil, and then it'll be able to regenerate. So yeah, it just depends on the species and the kind, how it grows. The rule of thumb is a quarter.
Quarter. You're studying to be an herbalist right now. There's a question about where you're going to school, and can you talk a little bit about that? What is the school? And
so the school, there's it's based out of Virginia, and there's an on-campus school, and then they also have an online option, and it's at your own pace, but they give you 2.5 years to complete the certification. And I love the online platform, and I'm currently, I believe, 70% of the way done. And I would recommend the program. Again, it's the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine. So if you Google it, it'll pop up. But I highly recommend that course too. They have a lot of modules, and then you have your homework that you have to complete, but then you also do like a lot of, I want to say labs, but it's not really labs. But it's been very worthwhile, and I've learned so much.
Great. Can you talk about seaweed at all? Cultural significance of seaweed?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So John Schaefer is actually our expert on that, because he's a marine biologist. But so there's certain species of seaweed that we did eat, and there's also some that we use in basketry. And so the surf grass we would gather and dry, and then we'd use that in a lot of our basket caps as overlay. So it was used in place of maidenhair fern, and it looks a little similar. It dries a little differently, but so we'd smoke that over a fire and use that as overlay in baskets. And then some of the seaweed we did eat.
And then I've got one more here. Are there plants that were culturally significant that are difficult to find now?
Yes. So some of you may be familiar with them. It's the Western lily, which is endangered, and it's actually not well known that that's actually an edible bulb like camas. And the seeds were also used for seasoning. Yellow sand verbena is also another rare one. It grows out in the sand dunes. I don't think it's listed or anything. I just find it hard to find in our territory now that with the colonization of European beach grass on the dunes, it's getting even harder and harder to find, because there's not, the yellow sand verbena likes the open sand. And so when you have those other non-native species in there competing for space and stabilizing stuff, they don't have the environment to grow in. What's another one? I find fireweed, which was an important one, harder to find. I'm sure a lot of you are like, oh, that's everywhere. not over here on the coast. I have a hard time finding it.
You might find it next spring, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And then another one is the giant chain fern, which is getting harder to find. We use that in, which I think I have a basket cap back here. I'll go get it. We use that as overlay in our basketry. And so it's in, I don't know if you guys can see that. So it's in this basket cap right here. It's the red. So you take we might have some fern here too. So this is the giant chain fern stem. And so we dyed it with the red alder bark like I talked about in the video. And then you overlay it on your basket cap. And this is a cattail basket cap. What else is getting harder to find? I'm sure there's a lot.
Ashley, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time tonight to join us, to share your willingness to share your expertise with us.
Yeah.
As Ashley mentioned, if you're interested in learning more, I highly suggest this book, and I will send the link out to that. I hope you can join us next week for our 4th HabiChat with Brian Bangs of ODF&W, who will be talking about fish recovery and recent delistings under the Federal Endangered Species Act. And again, Ashley, just much gratitude to you for taking the time, going out in the field, giving us a virtual tour of a site. I actually haven't been out to Wren Marsh myself personally yet, and so it was really fun to be able to see it through your eyes and learn a little bit about the plants out there. So I look forward to being in the field with you, hopefully in the future very soon.
Gala, thank you.
All right, and to all of you out there tonight, I wish you a nice evening and a restorative weekend. Thank you so much again for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Galaquilas, good night.
Thank you, Ashley.